I'm here with U.S. soccer legend Brandi Chastain. Hey, Brandi, how you doing?
I'm well, Andy. How are you?
Good. So let's talk about let's start out talking about soccer, which is probably our favorite subject. You played in some pretty exciting World Cups, and one thing that comes to my mind is that you played in the Olympics too. And I think a lot of times us soccer people, and I blame some of this on the men. We don't really think about the Olympics, and I follow the EPL. I follow soccer all around the world, and I know that when the Olympics come around, at least with the men's game, for example, a lot of what you see is teams that are kind of tired, depleted. They played their season, they played the UEFA Cup, and then it seems like the Olympics are an afterthought. But it seems like with the women's team, especially American and English players, it's a bigger deal. And I'm not saying that you put more heart into it than the men around the world do, but it just seems to be a different occasion. So talk about like how important and fun the Olympics were for soccer women in the U.S. and just maybe some things that we don't know about Olympic soccer.
Well, I would say first and foremost, everybody needs to know that the history of women's soccer in the Olympics is very brief. The first time women's soccer was in the Olympics was only 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
96 was the first time women's soccer was entered into the Olympic Games, and that was a big deal because it was the Centennial Olympics. It was here in the U.S. At the Atlanta Games, and that happened to also be a summer of Olympic gold for so many other women's sports: basketball, track and field, gymnastics, swimming. I mean, you name it. Women's U.S. women's teams were dominating, so that was an amazing Olympics to be a part of. Now, to your question specifically about what's the difference between why women's soccer maybe embraces the Olympics a little bit more. I'm not sure it does, but you have to understand the profile too, which is on the men's side, it's an under 23 tournament plus I believe it's three overage players, and on
Mm-hmm.
the side it's full national teams. So the environment's a little bit different. The composition of the teams is a little bit different. Again, IOC is competing against FIFA because FIFA is in charge of the World Cup. And so that's a very special tournament, obviously, to all of us who have been involved in soccer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different beast in the Olympics than it is in a traditional just soccer alone event.
Good deal. So I know that you're working with an organization called Save the World, and there's I take it based on what I hear about it, you're a little bit of an environmentalist at heart, and they have a product line and some special things. So maybe tell me just so I don't mangle it up, kind of tell me a little bit about what you're doing with that and sort of where the inspiration for that comes.
Right. Well, I don't want to upset environmentalists because I don't want to pretend that I'm something that I'm not, but I do
Mm-hmm.
feel that every person has the ability to make small change. And if
Mm-hmm.
we all decide to embrace small change, then big things can happen. And I got introduced to Save the World from a friend of mine, Marcy Weiss, who introduced me to this aqueous ozone spray bottle, which I've always been, I feel like I've always been conscientious about making good choices
Mm-hmm.
for my family and for my home and hopefully as well for the environment. Um, and then when this came to me, you know, I always am curious because I'm not a scientist about all the big long words that are in all the cleansers and things that we use in our houses, and I don't know what any of them are, but I know that they have things that I can't pronounce that I
Yeah.
don't know what they do. And so um, when the bottle came into my life, I it was a kind of a revelation about how just water, electricity, air, oxygen can when all combined together and flow through this little mesh that happens in the aqueous ozone bottle, um, it creates aqueous ozone, which is for a century or more been used to deodorize, sanitize, and be used as a cleaner. So I thought, well, this makes sense to me. You know, most people have access to running water, and
Mm-hmm.
if that's all you need to put into the bottle to create, obviously this came about with COVID, but to create a cleanser, that seems friendlier to the environment, and that's why I said yes.
Good
Uh,
deal.
so I'm trying to do my part And I believe this bottle, one, you don't have repetitive bottle, you don't have to buy repetitive bottles. We don't have to increase that massive island that's out in the ocean
Yeah.
floating around. And I don't know what's in those bottles. And so I like the fact that it's just water, and
Hmm.
I can do the same job as before, and maybe even save a little money in the end.
Good deal. I saw your dog rolling around behind you there. What's your dog's name?
Come here, Ray. This is Ray.
Ray?
He's a Bernie Doodle,
Bernie
and
Doodle.
yeah, she's my office mate. She'll every now and again she'll come up to me and just nudge me. Oh, thank you, Ray. She'll nudge me to say, "Hey, I think it's time to get out of the office."
Okay, we'll just tell her we got a few more questions.
Yeah.
But my dog's at daycare. Otherwise, he'd probably be sitting right next to me trying to get my attention. But so speaking about changing the world and changing things, why don't we talk a little about equal pay? As I told you before we got on, I got the great opportunity to talk to Billie Jean King about 2 weeks ago, and that was mind blowing. And she talked a lot about equal pay and what she and some other tennis players did back in the 70s. But at the same time, we're in 2021, and last I heard, women who play soccer don't get paid the same as the men who play for U.S. soccer, even though they've won World Cups and the men haven't. As far as I know, it's not the same in England. I think the FA pays the men and the women the same, at least for their matches. But talk about your perspective on that. We didn't. I know that it was probably working in your mind when you were trying to win the World Cup in '99, but we didn't hear a lot of talk about it. Maybe the media didn't lead us there.
Yeah.
But talk about maybe sort of your perspective on equal pay and how we remedy the situation. And also that one of your teammates, Cindy Parlow, is now heading U.S. soccer. How does that all fall together?
Well, this is the big question, and a really heavy topic, obviously, very timely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a soccer topic. So I think that needs to be understood as well, that
Mm-hmm.
equal pay is just not existing in the sports world. But from our perspective, um, we have had many, many discussions with U.S. soccer about um, the inequity between the men and women's team. And the comeback has always been in the past, sponsors, right? Sponsor dollars, sponsor interest, and um, and at times it could be fan interest, and that has evolved, and we
Mm-hmm.
know how that's evolved, and it's um, the numbers show that U.S. women's national team um, gather very many people. And
Mm-hmm.
so that argument doesn't hold up anymore. And what also has been happening recently is that sponsors, and I'm going to give you one specifically, and they're not paying me to say this, Visa
Mm-hmm.
has been a supporter of the U.S. of U.S. soccer. And they had a disagreement with U.S. soccer because they said this is for men's and women's soccer, and U.S. soccer told them we will uh, do with the funds what we think is best, which is not in an equal way. And
Mm-hmm.
said, well, we don't have to do business together then. And until U.S. soccer agreed that it would be split, then Visa said yes. So I think it's that type of responsibility from big corporations who are interested in the deep, rich well of women's soccer in this country, of getting involved, of taking a stand and saying that the dollars that they're spending in sponsorship should be equally divided. I'll give you another example. This is years past, but things of sponsors that would come as a woman's product would come and say, hey, we would like to sponsor the women's national team. And the answer was no, you have to sponsor all of soccer.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we know that those dollars weren't equally spent. So I think with Cindy in charge, Cindy having gone through being a player for U.S. soccer, understanding the landscape of what the history of what women's soccer has looked like and where it is and where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have the perfect storm, and the awareness through the use of social media and media outlets. It can't be. It's not quiet anymore, and that I think at times is a really great thing,
Yeah.
and feel like a burden in other times. But I think in this situation, it will continue to cast light on inequities in every arena, not just in sports.
Good deal. Let's talk about the game a little bit. Back when you were playing around and after the '99 World Cup, you played domestically, I think, with, I don't know if you pronounce it WUSA or WUSA.
W.
Um, okay. I want to say WUSA. I don't know why I want to say
Well,
that.
no, some people do. I don't know. I just never did, but that's fine. You can say.
Okay. And so now you have, Rose Lavelle and Abby Dahlkemper, who play for the U.S. Women's national team, and probably some others that I'm not thinking of right now, playing for Man City.
Sam
You've
Mewis.
got, what's that?
Sam Mewis.
Sam US too, yeah, of course. And then you've also got, I was going to go on to, you've got Kristen Press playing for Man United, and you've got different women for some of the, the better women in the game playing at these big historic clubs where we typically think of, big money, big dollars, big stage. Obviously, the players like Lavelle and Dahlkemper and Ellen White, they obviously should play for the best clubs because they're the best players. But how do we? How what kind of effect do you think that's having on the sport? Obviously, it's going to make it better, but it's just such a light years from 20, 22 years ago when that wasn't even a thought. That you'd have women from the U.S. playing for Man United and Man City and Barcelona and Arsenal. These top clubs. So talk about that. I'm just interested.
Well, number one, I think back to when I finished college. That was 1991, and I wasn't playing on the national team after the '91 World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Still believe that I should be in that environment, but I really didn't have a place to play here, and so I moved to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I played in that league, which was an excellent experience, and I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity because it gave me a chance to look at soccer from a different lens. Um, the fact that these big clubs are now investing in women's soccer just solidifies and validates the fact that of what we have been talking about all along, that women's soccer has a viable product, it has a fan base, there is an untapped well of riches, as I already said, and it, to me, it's got the highest ceiling, if there is even a ceiling. No other sport right now is as powerful or as well known as women's soccer. And so for the players who are choosing to play overseas, I don't begrudge any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Say to NWSL, and as somebody who's now a part of a group that wants to bring a team back to the Bay Area, we have to be better. We have to be better as a league. We have to be better as organizations. And it's not just getting fancy names on like, hey, we got this person to invest money. It's literally having a better structure. It's about creating an environment that is that professional environment that these traditional clubs for the men's side have been doing for 100 years. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to all of a sudden be Manchester United or Man City. Go City.
Yeah. Good.
But I think here in the US, we have a chance to do that in the way that we see women's soccer being successful while adding, as we always have, because we're a country that is a melting pot, of adding different flavors to this pot to make it really spectacular. And I believe that we will do that and that the NWSL will attract those players back. And I think players should have an experience. Check out another country, play under a different coach, hear a different voice, and this is where if this is where you grew up,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll come back. And if it's not where you grew up, then we'll lure you here with not just great soccer, but great places to live, like the Bay Area,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll help you grow your soccer. So and enjoy the game as a fan. So I think we all are in this together. I remember having this conversation with Julie Foudy when the WSA was first coming around. We want to have a league that stands on its own, women's soccer. And I thought, boy, we really need soccer to do well, right? We need everybody in soccer to do well. It's not them or us. It's we. And so I hope that's what we can see is that we're growing soccer globally
Mm-hmm.
in the US and not just in England and not just in Germany or not just in Sweden.
Good deal. Let me ask you a personal question about your time during the '99 World Cup and leading up to that. I'm not going to ask you about the goal and the celebration again because we've already talked about that. But I remember just off the top of my head watching those games, and a lot of the focus was on Julie Foudy and Mia Hamm and the offensive piece of it, and also Michelle Akers. And you were kind of like, I don't know if you knew this or not, you were sort of treated by the broadcasters as a sort of fledgling defender who just kind of made the cut on the team. I don't know if you had maybe more of a, you talked before about how supportive the women's team is, but I imagine the environment is just as cutthroat as any other top level sport. So I want to find out kind of like how difficult it really was to make that team, to stay on the team, and then, to play every game and then to see win the whole, help the team win the whole thing in the final moments. You had to go through a lot that wasn't just glamour and fun and highlight shots. I imagine you had some pretty tough days on the field and in practice. So why don't you shed some light on that for some of us who don't get to see the nitty gritty of the tough day at practice?
Yeah, sure. No, my road to the national team was rocky, which is a blessing. I really believe, I went through some hard injuries. I had 2 ACL reconstructions, an MCL reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
That kept me away from soccer for 2.5 years or more. And so I think during that time, I really took pause and got a great dose of perspective of what does the game mean to me, and was I doing all the things that I thought were the right things, or what were the right things. And so when I came back to the team in a different capacity, not in this goal scoring mode, it really it for me was, it showed that there was a lot of trust and respect, but you still had to earn it. And that, one of the greatest things I believe about the women's national teams that I played on, and I can't tell you whether this is true or not with the other national teams because I'm not on those teams, but I hope it is the case, is that every player matters. And yes, we are all competing for a starting position, and then we're competing to make the roster, right? We want to go to the World Cup, or we want to go to the Olympic Games, and you want those players on your roster. But there was also this really respectful competitiveness, that where Julie Foudy and I used to have these absolute brawls. The ball would be on the other side of the, like, 4v4 or whatever it would be, and
Mm-hmm.
the whistle would blow for the practice to be over, and we'd be laughing our head off. So there was days where it was a grind. There's no doubt about it, Andy. You know, but it was also such a supportive environment. This team really cared about each other, and I feel like the chemistry of the team really can dictate the outcome and the success. And so, were there days when you're thinking, "Gosh, that is it's not good enough, or it's so hard, or how can I do it again?" But your teammates are there to lift you up, and you're there to lift them up when the days were hard. And when you have people like Michelle Akers or Mia Hamm or Julie Foudy or Tiffany Milbrett, Cindy Parlow as your teammates,
Mm-hmm.
Christine Lilly, those things seem to fall by the wayside, and you just get down to business. You do your best at the best that you can on that day, and you be respectful of the process. And if you are the player that is on the sideline, you do everything possible to make the player that's playing on the field the best that they can be. And then when it's your time, you give the quality that's needed to fulfill the job. And that's really the mentality. And it was a long process, but it was awesome.
Great. Well, Brandi Chastain, thanks for taking time to talk to me today.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Andy.
Good deal.